This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast brought to you by Prize Picks, coming a Thursday afternoon. It's February 29th after the Wolves' 9-point win over Jaren Jackson Jr. and the Grizzlies on Wednesday night. And the plan for this episode is to begin solo, just me, by hitting on a few things that stood out in that game last night, play some clips from Finch and the players in the locker room afterward. But the bulk of this episode, and in case you want to just skip ahead, about 15 minutes in, is going to be a Wolves-Kings conversation. Brendan Nunez, who covers the Kings for Sacktown Sports 1140, will join me again about 15 minutes into this episode. And Brendan and I are not so much going to preview the Wolves-Kings game on Friday, but more so have a bigger picture conversation about how the Wolves and Kings might match up for a potential playoff matchup, because as we sit here on February 29th, the Wolves are the number 1 seed and the Kings are the 8th seed. I've been watching the Kings a lot recently. Felt like I was just kind of out of touch with them. So after the All-Star break, I've been, watching more of them, thinking with the idea that maybe this is a Wolves potential matchup. And I'm not going to be able to give the type of information that Brendan does. So that's why we want to have him on. He's as good as it gets in the Kings niche. But let's start by talking about last night's win over the Grizzlies. Quickly, a reminder off the top, today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. $100 sign-up bonus if you head over to prizepicks.com or the Prize Picks app. And when you create an account and you use the promo code Dane, you get that $100 sign-up bonus. No Wolves game tonight, but there are 8 other Wolves games going on. Warriors, Knicks, and then Heat, Nuggets are on TNT. If you make a Prize Picks slate, let's do it tonight. Do a screenshot, tweet it out, tag me in it. I'll sweat them along with you while we're watching non-Wolves basketball tonight. But let's start with the Wolves. Wolves Grizzlies, last night's game. Memphis comes out, starts the game on a 14-0 run before Finch calls a timeout. It's wild with this team, and coming out flat against a bad team is just as bankable, I think, for this Wolves team as it is that they will play at a high level when they are playing against a good team. If the Wolves play the Clippers, the Bucks, the Thunder, the Celtics, you kind of know what you're going to get. The Wolves are going to play well, at least going to have that sort of effort. They've done that consistently this season through 60 games. Now if they play the Blazers, the Nets, the Spurs, the Hornets, the Bulls, they're going to mess around for a little bit. That is just as much a truism. It doesn't mean they're for sure going to lose, just like last night, but they are going to, they're going to mess around a little bit or not kind of be locked in that whole time. And it gets dicey at times. And just sort of thinking about that during the game last night as they fall down 14-0, and you're like, okay, it's still the Grizzlies. Why is this way? Why do I know that this is what's going to happen at some point in the game, but also still sort of feel confident that the Wolves are going to win the game? And it's just all of it, for better or worse, is just quintessential 22-year-old Anthony Edwards. He is going to turn up for the Celtics, and he's going to float through at least a quarter or two against a Grizzlies team. And this Wolves team goes as Ant goes, right? Ant needs something to spark him, right? Put that fire in him, guarding Zaire Williams, as he was in the beginning of this game. That's not going to do it. That's not going to light that spark. And in the game, for Ant, in the first half at least, spark was never really lit. Again, the Wolves started the game down 14-0, and they were down at home at half to the 20-39 Grizzlies by 3 points. But then the third quarter comes around. Jaren Jackson Jr. starts rolling. He has 27 points midway through the third. The Wolves are down by 9. And that's when Finch put Ant on Jackson Jr. and boom, spark was lit. Game turned around. Here's Finch on putting Ant on Jackson and what kind of happened from there.
He took the Jackson matchup and basically shut his water off. Did a great job turning the game around both ends of the floor in the third. When we got down, 10 or whatever it was. Really, it was all about, his effort on defense setting the tone, and then we were able to kind of catch a rhythm on offense for the first time. So,
was that him asking for it? Was that you putting him on him?
No, I mean, he asked for it. He actually asked for it a little bit earlier in the game, but I was, wanted to just throw as many bodies at him as we could. You know, it's too easy for him. He's a heck of a player, but we had to get up underneath him, and Ant was, excellent at that.
His strength, even at giving up size, is that what kind of keyed that?
Yeah, I mean, he's incredibly strong, as you know. But it's literally, get up, put his body on him, make him feel you. I thought we gave him too much room to operate. He's got too much skill. He can eat up that space you give him, and then he's coming at you. He lunges at your chest, and he plays off your body, and he's just outstanding finisher with great length. So you got to take away his runway, and Ant was able to do that.
It was interesting. After the game, Ant was asked in the locker room about why he thinks he doesn't get more consideration for the all defensive team. And, and what the question was phrased, and like, what do you need to do to, be on that level and be in that consideration? I thought it was an interesting question. Ant kind of took it in a funny direction. I'll play that in a second. But I thought it was an interesting question, not because I think Ant is close to being an all defensive team player this season. The being locked in for Ant defensively is not there consistently. Everybody's watching that. You watch him off ball. He's still not very good at that. And, those things probably, until those turn up, he's not in this conversation, in my opinion. But it is interesting to think about how valuable the specific skill set that Ant has defensively is. As Finch put it, the ability to shut someone's water off in a one-on-one matchup. I was thinking earlier in this week, as I don't know, Wolves and Thunders fans hate each other for some reason now, but it was underneath one of my, tweets about something related to Ant, and, two people are going back and forth about who's the better defender between Ant and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So I'm seeing him, I'm tagged in it. And my initial thinking was okay, come on, Shai is very consistent on the defensive end. He's, the numbers bear out that he's been one of the best defensive players in the league this season. But I was thinking about it after the game last night, and it is a different skill set defensively that a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has, or even a Nickeil Alexander-Walker or Jaden McDaniels to some extent. There's this idea of being a consistent defender, an effort defender, a smart defender. Shai is all those things, but physically, he's not shutting off someone's water in the way that Ant can, not a star at least, because it's just a physicality sort of thing that Ant has on Shai there that, that's his gift. And again, maybe Shai isn't the best example. You can think about it on this team. Nickeil, great defender. I think Nickeil's maybe having, behind Rudy, the best defensive season on the Wolves this year, but he's kind of like that too, right? He is just gonna give you that consistent effort, and he's a good defender because he makes it harder on the defensive player. He limits their percentages, right? The likelihood that a shot is going to go in, or that they're going to get into the action that they want to when Nickeil Alexander-Walker is on them, goes down. But the difference with Ant, again, is situationally and in just significantly smaller spurts, again, like last night, he can just shut someone off. We saw it with Jackson Jr. last night. You think back to Tatum. I mean, we could list off a handful of other times that he's done it this season. It's just an interesting way to think about defense and how to apply value, right, to it and measure what matters, in the regular season for an all defensive award might be different than what's more valuable in the playoffs. And an Ant is just in probably more in that playoff bin, right, than he is the consistent 82 game defender. But it just, I don't know. The question last night sparked that idea, and Ant naturally took it kind of in a completely different direction. Here's Ant when asked about it after the game.
In your career, you would talk a lot more about all defense and those kind of goals. We see nights like tonight, you have that capability. What do you think has to happen
in order for me to get that?
To get into that conversation?
I think people got to watch more Minnesota Timberwolves games as far as whoever the voters are. I think, they just got to watch the games because it's not my first time doing this. I have nights like this all the time where somebody get hot or their best player get hot, and I go shut them down the rest of the game, and nobody sees it but y'all. And I think that goes into my votes of all defensive team, but nobody sees it, only y'all see it. So I think they got to watch more games. I think that's the outcome.
Would you like to take on those matchups even more? It does seem like you're
yeah, I mean,
situational. You used. Like,
especially
right
the second half of the season. Like I feel like I'm in my best shape now, so I would love to take on more matchups.
I was gonna say, is that something where you have to?
So if Ant is in his, best shape of the season, and it, certainly sort of looks like it. I mean, the physicality's been there. There's just a couple times recently this week, just watching him sprint dribble. And it's just like, I feel like he can sprint dribble faster than any of the nine players on the floor can just sprint. I mean, he's physically special. And when he's in shape and has the energy to do so, maybe because of that, you will see more instances like last night where he is able to earlier or more often kind of guard a guy like that. The consistency of it needs to go up. Then, yeah, if he does that, he has more of a case to be considered in that elite class of defenders that, maybe we put Jaden McDaniels in. And speaking of Jaden, bounce back game from him last night. Stat line wasn't massive, but he had 12 points, 2 for 4 from 3, 3 for 3 from 2, and also had 3 blocks. Again, not a huge stat line, but he's been struggling recently. Certainly his best game since the All-Star break. And if you're going to go through the game logs, I think you can make a case that was maybe his best game of February, and even kind of going back into January a little bit. It's confidence, right? That was the word Finch and the players all used when they were talking about McDaniels last night. And I think we can kind of see it too. We know that when you see that early confidence from Jaden, it makes a difference in how I think we project out what the rest of the game is going to look like from him. And it was interesting to hear Naz Reid sort of echo that after the game. Here's Naz on Jaden.
100%. I mean, I think he shot one corner three. As he was shooting it, I could just see the confidence in the shot. I started yelling, I think he's back. But, yeah, you could just tell, he's starting to find his legs again. So that's good.
Again, consistency. It's that's what it's about with Jaden. But that situation overall, the inconsistency thus far, just from being at some of these practices and pregame medias and stuff like that, hearing Finch, it's something they're talking about more. They're being more intentional about trying to find ways to effectively feed that. He's referenced conversations with Jaden one-on-one that they've been having to try and find more of that rhythm, more of that consistency. Conversations he's had with the coaching staff, sort of brainstorming how do they do this again more consistently, so Jaden's games more often than not look like last night and don't look like 2 nights ago against the Spurs. Again, Wednesday, definitely a step in the right direction for him, which I think is globally really encouraging for the Wolves. Last game-specific thing from the Grizzlies game I have was it wasn't a good Rudy Gobert game. And it's wild to look at the box score after this game to see that the only 2 players on the Wolves in the negatives, in the plus minus, were Rudy Gobert and Mike Conley. Gobert was minus 16, the lowest on the team, minus 16 in a game they won by 9, which means the Wolves won the minutes that Rudy sat last night by 25. I mean, there's reasonable excuses here. It was a back-to-back. He's still kind of coming back from that injury. But at the same time, Rudy's been so consistent that when he doesn't have a good game, when he gets benched to close the game, or doesn't, I don't know, benched is the right word. They didn't bring him back in to close the game. I just think it's noteworthy. We're pointing to these because these are the situations. Like last night, it didn't really seem like Rudy had a great matchup. He didn't really have a way to punish, or wasn't really punishing on the offensive side either. So we always want to note these things. This hasn't been a consistent thing with Rudy, but I thought it was worth asking Finch about after the game.
Rudy's been one of, if not your most consistent players this season. Didn't have that impact tonight. How much of that was back-to-back versus not having maybe the matchup for him?
I mean, I think when I took Rudy out of the game, I didn't intend to not finish with him, but as we've seen, and that team was rolling. Really in a good rhythm, both offensively and defensively. I felt like spreading the floor was important offensively as much as anything else, to be able to keep scoring. I felt we had to keep scoring. So I don't know how much. He did play a lot last night, almost 40 minutes. But he, I'm not worried about it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think this is anything to like sound alarm bells about it, but it to me it's worth putting a pin in. It's one I'm logging in my mind again in the sort of playoff matchup sort of thing. The Wolves did not have a matchup again other than Ant in the second half for that type of player like Jaren Jackson Jr. And not having a matchup for Jaren Jackson Jr. Gets filed in that Zion bin for me, right? Some concern with the idea that if the Wolves played Zion Williamson in the first round of the playoffs, they would need to find matchups for him, and it might not be one that Rudy Gobert can solve on his own. But I'm excited to dig into a different playoff matchup. I think I'm excited for this Kings game on Friday and to talk about it with Brendan and just kind of how the Wolves and Kings match up overall. We'll get to that there here in a minute after we grab our first ad break here. Today's show is brought to you by Adriana Lonick and Coldwell Banker. She is one of our new sponsors here for 2024. And I'm excited about this partnership because I think it's something that makes sense, again, for some of you that are in that stage of considering buying a home or considering selling your home. And when I met with Adriana, this made sense to me. There was that overlap. If you do have the need to, it's that desire to get that home or to sell your home, you need to start that process with a consultation with somebody who understands how this all works, more than you or I do. And Adriana certainly has that. We're also, adding a perk if you do schedule a consultation with Adriana. You mentioned this podcast, and you'll be entered into a small drawing for for free Wolves tickets to a game this season. Adriana is a Wolves fan and a season ticket holder. And she would love to work more with our little community here of podcast listeners, Wolves fans. You know what I always say with these businesses: if you have a need in these categories, keep it in kind of our little Wolves family here. So, if home buying or home selling is on your radar, it's sometimes hard to know where to begin. Go to thedancingrealtor.com or call, or you can even text Adriana at 715-304-9920. Again, mention this podcast, entered for a chance to win free Wolves tickets. Her name is Adriana Lonick, Coldwell Banker Realty. Again, that's thedancingrealtor.com or 715-304-9920. That stuff's all in the show notes below here. So get the ball rolling on home ownership and score a free pair of Wolves tickets at thedancingrealtor.com. And then the other thing I want to mention is, it's a big weekend of fun Wolves games. Like, it's not the Spurs and Grizzlies as it has been thus far this week. We get Kings on Friday night and the Clippers on Sunday. And if you are not going to Target Center for those games, those are fun ones to go out, and watch with friends or just other Wolves fans at Falling Knife Brewing Company. The Friday and Saturday games are particularly well attended there, more in the pub style, viewing of the game. So Friday night Kings, the Clippers, that's a matinee game, 2:30 on Sunday, a little Sunday fun day at Falling Knife. And they're actually having a 70s themed Trivia Mafia right after the Wolves game from 5 to 9 on Sunday too. So you can make a day out of it. Or, also if you're not wanting to drink or you don't drink, they have non-alcoholic beverages there. And they have just started making their own THC beverages that you can buy in the tap room. That's something they're excited about right now, too. They're actually having a THC beverage release party at Lit, the old Liquor Lyles in Uptown. That's Sunday at 2:00. So you can pop over there. That's $5 for anything Falling Knife at that party. And then maybe, go over to Falling Knife to watch the game. Just as always, Falling Knife, if you are wanting to go out to watch a Wolves game, that's the place to do it. Falling Knife Brewing Company in Northeast Minneapolis. All right, let's bring in Brendan Nunes from Sacktown Sports.
Hey, yeah.
We are now joined by Brendan Nunes, who's as good as it gets on the Kings beat. He writes for Sacktown Sports 1140. You can follow him on Twitter at Brendan Nunes NBA. I'm sure I'll tag that in the tweet for this episode in my feed. Brendan, I've been a Kings fan this week. I was looking at the standings coming out of the All-Star break, and it's like I should probably be like considering who the Wolves first round matchup was or is or will be, and sitting at 8, though really not that far away from the 5 seed, is the Sacramento Kings today as we're recording this February 29th. They are the 8 right now, and the Wolves are the 1. So I've been watching them, which is, it's always fun. Like when, you got that week where you're like, oh, I kind of like know this team. And then you go talk to somebody else who knows them every single day. And I'm like, okay, I don't actually know that much about them, but I'm excited to talk about this in the context of more of a playoff preview and, less so of a game preview for tomorrow. But thank you for making this happen. Know you're busy. How are you?
No problem. I'm doing great. I'm on the Dane Moore NBA podcast, man. I'm feeling like Kobe in the fourth quarter out here, or maybe we go LeBron in the fourth quarter after last night. Yeah. I'm doing good, man. I appreciate you having me on. I've also been trying to I should key in on these top 4 teams a little bit more. And Minnesota has been my one over the last couple days here that I've been really trying to focus in on. So solid timing.
Who do you think the best matchup for the Kings out of those 4 is? Like, if you're like, okay, I mean, I know you're a reporter, you're not like, but if you're the Kings and you want to win, who do you want to get of those 4?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's OKC, and I kind of think everybody's going to pick OKC. I don't know. The Clippers are in there too, for sure.
They're not looking good recently.
No, they have not. I still worry about their ability to abuse mismatches, and I think that's one of the Kings' really big weaknesses. Kevin Huerter and Malik Monk, or you can throw Harrison Barnes. Sometimes Keegan Murray is a mismatch as well for some of these teams. And I think OKC, like the Chet and Sabonis matchup, is really interesting to me. I think both guys just have advantages over each other offensively. It's the type of guy that Domas does well against, using his weight, his physicality, finding ways to score around the basket and sort of making plays for his teammates from there. And then on the other end, obviously Chet kind of can pull him out. And I think Gordon Hayward's a really big hit for them too, especially those closing lineups without Giddey. You have full spacing out there. There's no place that you can hide Kevin Huerter from Sacramento's perspective. So, I mean, it's definitely OKC or the Clippers. And yeah, I really don't like Denver and Minnesota's size, man. And the more I've watched them these last couple of weeks, like I know the defense is crazy, but I can't help but every game be like, God, this is ridiculous.
Like, is Alex Len going to have to play against the Wolves in the playoff series like that?
I think so. Like, I kind of don't hate the idea of Trey Lyles and you just try to lean into your offense, but I think it has to be Alex Len. Like, JaVale McGee has not been very good this year, which people were very excited about JaVale coming into the year. Kind of surprised me considering what happened last year in Dallas on a team that really needed a big, but I think it's Alex Len at that backup 5. I do remember last year, though, like the big Trey Lyles at the backup 5 game was when Sabonis fouled out in Minnesota, and then Trey had a big 5th quarter or overtime period pulling Gobert out the paint. But this year, it's just been you only go to Trey Lyles like reactionary to match another small ball lineup. So my guess would be Alex Len. And I actually don't mind Alex Len. Like, I think that he's a serviceable backup.
He's big. He's certainly a big body. You're talking about the Sabonis Chet matchup there. I think the Sabonis Gobert one is really interesting in this matchup in particular. Before I brought you on, we were talking a little bit about the Wolves played the Grizzlies last night. Didn't really have an answer for Jaren Jackson Jr. That's kind of like their thing. They don't have an answer for kind of that playmaking, scoring for like in the Wolves fan base. There's sort of this like fear of like, not want to play the Pelicans because who's going to guard Zion? Not that they, I don't think Wolves fans necessarily think they're going to lose the Pelicans, but that's sort of the, the pain point in that matchup. And Jaren Jackson Jr. sort of emulated that last night. Sabonis is a 5, but there's a lot of similarity in that Gobert is not an answer for Zion and isn't an answer for Jaren Jackson Jr. What he is a weapon at, and the best weapon there is at, is, like you said with Giddey, ignore Giddey. Good luck scoring at the rim when the Wolves have those other 4 defenders and Rudy's coming there to lurk. But his weakness, I think, if we are picking nits of the defensive player of the year, it is in kind of these pick and roll situations or any sort of situation where Rudy's like, all right, I need to guard this guy from 15 to the rim, and the floor is spread around them. That can be in an isolation type situation, but where it happens with the Kings most is when they spread the floor and they just get into that pick and roll game, and it goes to Domas sort of in the like play from the nail down, and in isolation, Rudy's not going to shut that water off against Sabonis there, and that presents an interesting sort of layout for the Wolves, because I'm not really sure how else they go about guarding Domas in that sort of way. So broadly, I mean, my view on this series is the Wolves are more talented. If we want to list Kings' weaknesses, we want to make a list of the two. The Kings list is longer. I'm more interested in looking at the ways in which the Wolves can, or the Kings can hurt the Wolves. And I think the Sabonis Gobert one is kind of at the top of my list. How do you think about that matchup?
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I feel like often this year, it's like I wish that Sabonis would just try to be a little bit more aggressive as a scorer. And I know that, that's not his best skill. And part of what makes him so good is his unselfishness. But I think that sometimes they could benefit from it. Last night, they play the Nuggets, no De'Aaron Fox. He takes, I think it's 8 shots in that game. No, sorry, I'm thinking of the Miami game. But he got up a good amount of shots in the Denver game. They're just not going down at a great rate. Like these hook shots he's efficient when he gets to them, but it just doesn't happen all that often. And I don't think that it's something Sacramento is the most comfortable with going to. This like free flowing offense, those DHOs that you kind of mentioned, really freelance, and they want to be unpredictable offensively. And part of it is being so read and reactionary rather than having set plays is the formula to that. But I do think that there are pros and cons, that sometimes you have games where you accomplish that, but then at other times, say you do have a matchup that you like, they try to find ways to abuse that in the flow of the offense. But I think sometimes you could just be a little bit more black and white. Like just try to get to this because this is where the advantage is, and then make plays from there. So I definitely get what you're saying, but I don't feel great from Sacramento's perspective coming into a series thinking like, okay, Domas has got to be a scorer this one.
Yeah, well, that's the classic thing when you're looking at it from the 1 side to the 8 side. You do like the jaded of like, oh, how could it go wrong? And to be fair, I think that like that Spurs game, and maybe Domas was kind of sick or something coming out of it, and just broadly in the 3 games I've watched since the All-Star break, it's like, okay, do you just don't shoot jump shots anymore? Like, is that?
Nope, not really.
Because that might just be an answer with Gobert there. Right, is just deep. You just play that drop deep if they're going DHO. If it's Fox, because then like Fox can kind of take that pull up 3 somewhat uncontested, but they don't really have that's not really his game. Maybe Monk could get to that a little bit more. I think there.
Fox, Monk, and Murray are the 3 for me that could do that. And Keegan, it's still like a process. You don't know necessarily if it's going to go great any given night, but those are definitely the 3.
Does Keegan do that like a top the key spread pick and roll? Like,
yeah, I mean, it's definitely more like DHO rather than traditional pick and roll, right? But yeah, they're doing that a little bit more this year. He played one-on-one with De'Aaron Fox like all offseason. They have a good relationship, and it's funny. You can kind of see him try to almost emulate some of De'Aaron's moves, and they can look a little awkward with like a hard plant when you're a 6'8" guy compared to someone 6'3" and as quick as De'Aaron. But he's playing with it a little bit more, 1-2 dribbles, mid-range floater, and things like that.
I want to talk about him more in a little bit, but you want to just like kind of go back and forth of like different things that make us, concerned about the matchup. So I took Sabonis potentially being able to hurt Gobert, which he did do. Like that happened, I think in the most recent game against the Wolves, where you were like, oh, okay, that might be an issue. What issue? I mean, you mentioned the size, but what issue is top of the list for you when you think about a Kings playoffs series? And going against these Wolves.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Kings defense is they're very similar to what they were last year. They're a team that makes their money on the offensive end, but there's a clear emphasis on we need to be better defensively. The whole thing this year is, regular season obviously does matter here, but we're playing for the playoffs, and that's part of the unpredictable offense, the emphasis on defense, even if that's meant sacrificing the offense a little throughout this regular season. But they don't really have the personnel for it. I still think this team goes as far as their offense takes them when it comes down to it. And I do think that they're going to have nights where they're going to be able to score. It's really Sacramento's defense for me, where they're the worst 3-point defense team in the league. And some of that's bad luck. They're like, bottom 10 in the amount of wide open threes they give up, but easily top percentage.
Yeah,
And
they're scrambling though. Like that's
They
what
are.
the more you scramble, the lower the percentage goes. It's kind of like almost baked into the plan. I mean, it's how the Wolves played defense before they got Gobert, and it was the same thing. It's like
just junk it up.
Yeah, and then at times when you're junking it up, you're just gonna leave somebody wide open,
Right.
and if you have a point guard who can kind of pick that apart, find the guys in the corner, that's when I've seen like the Kings defense just kind of like deflate. And it's like, we're trying hard. Like, look at us, we're trying hard. But it's the thing, I guess, related to that with the defense, for me, that makes me a little bit worried about it from a Wolves perspective is the Wolves have like the third highest turnover rate in the league. And when I watch the Kings, they look obsessed with playing passing lanes and deflections and all of that sort of stuff with gap help and just making it difficult for in this series for Ant, or if it's Mike Conley trying to get in, even Naz Reid off the bench trying, like, they are going to, the Kings do not have great defensive personnel, but they are going to harass the hell out of whoever they play night today, or at least their best defensive games are going to do that. You think about the playoffs, all right, like the energy is probably going to be there to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I think that like Minnesota, obviously, like you mentioned, turnovers or late game execution, or it kind of seeming to get to a little, all right, what can Ant get a bucket this possession, or can Cat do it? That is definitely my biggest question, because I think there's going to be nights where Minnesota might shoot themselves in the foot a little bit, or, partial credit also to Sacramento's junk it up defense, kind of like we're talking about. And there's going to be other nights where it's like, this is where you probably should be making it a close game, is by taking advantage of some of their more stagnant offense. But instead, somebody falls asleep on the weak side and they get an easy three. Right. Wolves is, top 2 in 3-point percentage this year. Just so many threats. Ridiculous roster, by the way. There's like very few teams you watch in the league that everybody checks in and you're just like, God, now this guy, it's ridiculous. But that Minnesota's offense and Sacramento's defense is definitely like the most intriguing aspect of this to me.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that for sure. It's and the Wolves are still just like an average offensive team. So I think if you are the Kings, you're like, well, we can just kind of like play our version of decent defense. Maybe that won't be a huge win for the Wolves there.
And I think they're just going to get like Kevin Huerter these last 2 games, for example, hunted nonstop.
Game was,
dude, Bam Adebayo, Jaime Jaquez, whoever it is, hunting Huerter. Last night you saw Jamal Murray just hunting Kevin Huerter. And actually, after that game, Huerter, had some comments about, I wish I was out there more, and which is an interesting little wrinkle here. But that's a mismatch. I mean, I think that obviously Cat's going to have some mismatches as well, even if he goes about it a little bit of a different way. Right. I think you start with Keegan on Ant.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
You get Malik switched onto him. You get Kevin switched onto him. Like, I'm not feeling good about that one.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about. I mean, if they just go with their normal starting lineup, like the hiding place, quote unquote, for the Wolves offense is Jaden McDaniels. That's where I would assume tomorrow night, I'm assuming Huerter will take that there. And then it kind of becomes one of these, Jaden's just like got a big FU energy to when like the Hawks will put like Trae Young on him and he'll be like, okay, no, like, but Huerter's, what is he, 6'7"? It's not like he's not a great defender, but he's not just like a put him in the basket sort of guy there. So I think it's, that's interesting there. Maybe Wolves fans don't know how good defensively Keegan Murray and the step he's made on that side of the floor has been this year. Probably have him on Ant. The Cat one, and maybe this will be my next thing, but we could talk about it from the Kings defensive side of it. Like they're going to need to double him in the post if the Wolves do that, which is this sort of double-edged sword thing for Cat in general, and has been. I think he's gotten a little bit better about kind of like keeping his cool, kicking it out once 2 gets there. But I mean, that's what they'll probably put Harrison Barnes on him, try and bring the double there. And Carl's going to need to have that like ability to read getting off the ball or going through it decisively and quickly. Like this team, the Kings as a matchup for the Wolves is so much to me about Cat being fast in decision makings on the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball. As much of an advantage he has against maybe Harrison Barnes or some other sort of wing guarding him in the post on offense, he's going to need to chase on the other side of the floor. And the Wolves have played the Kings twice this season. The Wolves lost the game that Cat played in, and they won the game that Cat sat out. And I think it was because part of that, like that is another sort of concern I have about a Kings matchup is how it forces Cat to chase and the way in which the Kings offense sort of naturally wants to do that. Maybe you can help like describe what the Kings offense looks like and specifically how they'll make Cat or even Nas, when he's coming in there, really move against wing type players.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous pace, first of all. Like, that was a big emphasis last year and continues to be one this year, specifically post All-Star break, even an additional emphasis on that. And excuse me, sorry.
You're good.
But yeah, I mean, turnovers are obviously going to play a factor there. But when you get to the half court, it's just shooters are sprinting to the corners.
Yeah.
And from there, a whole lot of ball reversals and DHOs really through Domantas Sabonis. So you have Kevin Huerter in that corner and or even Harrison Barnes in the Cat situation. Cat's kind of got to be right up on him as he's going to come off that screen and be able to trail. And you play that wrong. The Kings are good about back cutting and taking advantage of that and sort of keeping the action flowing throughout all of that. But really, it's a lot of coming off of DHOs with Sabonis. And if a guy takes it, paint touches, spray threes, trying to find weak side shooters as help defenders are coming in and things like that. But Cat getting through screens, like you're saying, is definitely going to be a big aspect here. But Harrison Barnes also will need to be aggressive.
Yeah.
Again, part of this free flowing offense is that there's so many nights where it's like, gosh, you probably could have gone to Keegan a little bit more. Or early this year, Harrison wasn't doing much. And then as he picks it up, Keegan slows down because there's just only so much. It feels like coming into the game, it can be, it's who's going to have the aggressive mindset tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much variance there in Sacramento's offense.
The Wolves are great at defending in isolation, like heavy isolation team. I mean, the Celtics, they played really tough. The Thunder, a little bit more once they figured them out a little bit, played them a couple of times. So like, okay, this is a drive and kick type of team, which is kind of like an isolation team. The Clippers, the Wolves have played really well. How often, like, where do the Kings rank in terms of like isolation frequency? Would that be like bottom half of the league?
Yeah, it's got to be towards the bottom. I haven't looked at the number recently, but it's not happening very often. There'll be moments where they'll set a punch screen and try to get a random post up for Harrison Barnes or De'Aaron or things like that. But it is very rare that you're seeing any sort of isolation. I think Mike Brown's big thing offensively is just not being predictable, I think. And it looks just like the Warriors from a couple years ago, just with very different personnel, but isolation is not happening that much. Even traditional pick and roll. I know DHO is sort of functions as the same, but I think a little more often they could just clear out a side and get De'Aaron and Domas in a pick and roll. And that'll happen, a couple times throughout the course of the game, but more often than not, it's just this free flowing read and react offense. Very few ISO pick and roll, kind of just rarely mixed in there. If you see it, it's probably like after a timeout.
Right. So mostly they're going to make those guys run. They're going to make and Nas is Cat too. Like Cat has exceeded expectations in his ability to do that. That was like biggest red flag for me with the permanent move to the 4 for Cat. But to his credit, he's not great at it, but it's better than I thought it would be. And then Nas is like just good at it. Like I actually remember right before he got hurt last year, they played the Kings and he was guarding and chasing Kevin Huerter. And I was like, he's fine. Like he was fine. And that has kind of, recovered from the injury, came back this year, and like Nas can guard wings now, which seems crazy in the like thought that he came into the league as a center, but he just doesn't play center anymore. I mean, he's more a 3 to me than he is a 5 these days, and And like that sounds like a bad thing, but it's really been an advantageous thing for them. Though the Kings, I think, of all the playoff opponents, are going to be the team that can pick at that more than anything. And if it is a playoff matchup, like I think Brown will need to let go of some of the. Finch is the same way. Like Finch wants the random offense flow. It's a low play set type thing, but I think the Wolves have to do that as well in the playoffs. Again, similarly, and they do it a lot more than Domas and Fox do. But clear the empty corner, side pick and roll with Conley and Gobert there. Like, I think this is a matchup where both Brown and Finch need to drill into the obvious areas of weakness that their offenses can pretty obviously exploit on the other end. So if it is a Kings Wolves series in the first round, it's that test for Cat right away. And it's an opportunity, man. It's an opportunity to, kind of shut some people up, do well enough defensively there, and then punish on the other side of the floor, because that's the other side of this coin too, right? It's like, cool, Cat's got to chase you on the other end, but he's also 6'11", 250. You got to guard him, going to the basket there. What else concerns you about a matchup here?
I mean, I think in general with the Kings, and this is kind of overarching, I think they're really just as good as they're going to go as far as De'Aaron Fox takes them. And I think that's on both ends of the floor, really. He sets the tone defensively, picking up full court and being extremely disruptive. He wants to average 2 steals this year.
Against Harden.
And that was like a mad Fox. When you get mad Fox, he's on another level. But huge jump as a 3-point shooter this year. Just ridiculous jump. And in that process, though, I think that he also kind of went away from the mid-range a little bit too much. Mm-hmm. And again, I think that's just part of the process here. This is the year he's taken the jump as a shooter. And last 5-10 games, you've seen him go back to that mid-range a little bit more. And I think that would be big in this series. We talk about that drop, if that's coming off a DHO and different things like this, or being able to take a guy off the dribble. DaneMooreProductions always does a great job on Fox, by the way. Length seems to be one of the things that bothers him a little bit more. But I think that him finding ways to score, and I really think that mid-range is going to be big. Obviously, the rim deterrent of Gobert, but finding ways to get paint touches, whether that's scoring in the mid-range with him and Malik, and again, either scoring from there or making plays, finding ways to break through the perimeter, paint touches, I think is really big for Fox and Malik specifically.
It's interesting you say Jaden does a great job on Fox. Because Jaden's good against everybody. Like, he's just one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. But when I think about the ways in which he gets got sometimes, I actually think about Fox and Tyrese Maxey, and it's just speed, where Jaden, like, I mean, he's 6'11" too. He's got more body to move, and it's not like he can't do it, but it's rare that even a step down speed wise from Maxey and Fox. Like, Jaden's fine. Those are kind of that. I mean, I'm sure there's a couple other guys I could put up there that can kind of burn past him. And I think too, like, we've been talking about all year about just kind of some of the dumbness surrounding the Rudy and the playoffs sort of thing. And like, oh, Rudy defending in space. Like, this is such a problem. Look at Utah or whatever. Like I actually think Rudy might be the Wolves' best isolation defender. Like, if it's just 4 low, spread it out, go guard the guy. Like, Rudy's great at it. It's one of the most crazy, like, weird.
You guys have the Timberwolves have so many options. It's ridiculous. Like, you sit here and talk about Rudy,
and then Ant's like 6th or something. Yeah.
Jaden, Nikhil, and the Kings are like, Keegan's good. After that,
yeah, right. No, this is a good reminder. There is a embarrassment of riches in perimeter defenders that the Wolves have, which is going to make it hard for Herter. It's going to be tough for Barnes tomorrow night and in that series. Even it'll probably be tough for Monk, because he's, I love Malik Monk, but he's a level down from Fox, obviously, in that sort of way. I am, though, like, that's one of my concerns, is just the speed of Fox being able to get by McDaniels and Gobert in those situations. he is one of the few that I'm like, yeah, he can beat you off the dribble, even Rudy, and get enough distance there where he can go finish without Rudy being able to kind of retreat back and pin that, which he's going to do against 98% of point guards in the NBA that he gets there. That's a weapon to me in this matchup with the Kings and Wolves.
Yeah, and I really think Fox is just really one of the better players in the league. Like when he's at his best, he's right up there. You know, we talked about the OKC series earlier. Like I pointed to Chet and Domas because I don't think that SGA and Fox are that far apart. It's consistency that obviously is a big difference, and that's not nothing, obviously, throughout the course of a regular season. Kind of the big difference between star and superstar, right? But when De'Aaron is at his best, he can absolutely take over a game. I think another big thing for him this year has been limiting turnovers, and that's probably where I would point out with McDaniels a little bit, right? Is that the length does seem to bother him at times, whether that or a Lou Dort, for example. Kings have lost all 3 games. Fox had at least 5 turnovers, or 2 and 8 when he has 4+. If he has less than 2, they're 10 and 2. And, you know, Domas has that playmaking ability, but it's so much different when it's coming from the perimeter and breaking down players and then making moves from there. So I think that De'Aaron definitely, I don't look at it as like, oh, McDaniels is going to shut him down. De'Aaron is going to get his. I think that's just the nature of how good of a player he is. But what's the shot diet going to be between mid-range and 3-point shots? And for what it's worth, I feel great about his threes at this point of the season. But really, I think that he is just simply good enough that he's able to get his against whoever he wants. But these length guys that manage to turn him over, and I heard you on a previous pod talking about how nobody has good transition defense. It's true, but there is really bad transition defenses, and I think the Kings fall into that.
Yeah, it is interesting that like the Wolves can offer the length option on him, and they can kind of throw the Dort option at him too with Ant, you know, and that's just what they do. I mean, because they do have so many different options. Is like that's what's going to be tough for Fox. He's gonna be like, all right, I figured out Jaden, or got 2 fouls on Jaden. That happens all the time. It's like, okay, here comes Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Like, you know, he's going to chase the shit out of you, you know, or Ant is going to get up into him there. Even like a Kyle, there's a lot of different looks that they are going to be able to throw at Fox. And that's what this is, I think, is going to come down to a lot, is how many of those frustrate him, and how long does that like frustration extend? Is it going to be like one bad quarter? Is it going to cost him a game completely? Is it going to cost him multiple games over the course of the series? I put it down, like Kings kind of go as far as Fox does in general. And I would say in this series too, because De'Aaron Fox probably just going to need to be the best player in the series if the Wolves, or if they beat the Wolves in a playoff series.
That's probably going to be it. And the minutes where Fox sits, I think, are going to be huge, because I would go to Malik Monk at that backup one. They haven't done that very often this year. They started doing it. They did it a little bit in Denver last night with no Fox, but it's Davion Mitchell that's getting thrown out there, and teams could care less about him from the perimeter. Like it's extreme to that point. And if
I don't know if he'll be able to play,
I don't think
they'll put Gobert on him, and
they
will just he'll just.
And really, like, the Kings have 7 guys that I feel good about, you know, and then you could throw Alex Len in there, like 8.
Yeah, but we're not putting Alex Len into the feeling good category.
Right, exactly.
We're like, he's a body that might be a body.
And even Trey Lyles is that 7th, where I'm like, all right, I feel okay, but any given night, you never really know. You could even point at some of the starters. Last night, Kevin Huerter plays less than 20 minutes because, like we talked about, he's just getting attacked out there. Harrison Barnes isn't aggressive, or you can't rely on Keegan every single night. And that's what makes this Kings team so inconsistent and tricky in my mind, is that you know what you're getting from Sabonis every single night. More often than not, you know what you're getting from Fox, even though there's some variance in between there. After that, I really have no clue. They want it to be Keegan, and sometimes it is, but it not in year 2. You don't feel comfortable consistently relying on that right now.
Yeah, you take away a little bit of the concerns of depth in, a playoff series, maybe more than you do tomorrow night, right? Like
Right.
it's a regular season game. But yeah, like the Wolves are significantly deeper than the Kings are, and that doesn't not matter in a playoff series,
Especially
like
when the Kings want to run like crazy.
yeah, that's a good point. Last thing I have for you, I don't even know if this is true, but this is what stands out to me is like, so the Wolves, they're big, right? And the whole thing for 2 years has been like, we're big, we're going to stay big. They need to like opponents need to adjust to our play style. If they go small, we're not going small. We stay big, and they do. Like they've done that for 2 years. I feel like Mike Brown does the opposite. Like I feel like he's not afraid to match up with the opponent's play style, and go small at times and go Lyles at the 5. Like it feels like, and maybe he's just like, I'm limited. I don't have a lot of depth. I don't have a lot of defenders. Like we need to play whatever style gives us the best chance to win in a given game. My question first is, one, is that true? And two, like that would be helpful to employ in a playoff series, correct?
Yeah, I think that we've seen it previously. Again, the Trey Lyles like coming out game at him at the backup 5 was in Minnesota last year, specifically with Rudy. But and then you saw it in the postseason as well. But that's where maybe Saric is the backup 5 for Golden State, or a lot of times we've seen it this year. It has been matching the other team's small ball lineup of, like I mentioned, Golden State, or Obi
Okay.
Toppin, with Indiana, Tice with the Clippers. And I've actually thought that, maybe you could lean into that a little bit more, but I think it is, again, Mike Brown is so focused on, we have to be better defensively for the postseason. And he seems to not want to be a guy that's like, let's just fully commit to, we have to win this game with our offense. And that there's so much variability and unpredictability with offense that he doesn't feel great doing that. But I do think sometimes you need to lean into that. And I think if we got to a postseason series, he definitely tries a lot of things. You can very much tell when he's searching for an answer, which I'm sure would happen throughout the course of the series. And at some point, I think you would go to, all right, let's try Trey here. Let's try to make sure that we can perform offensively and hope that we can muck up the game defensively, get some turnovers, try to get them into tough ISO shots and things like that. So I think that it would come up, but it might take a while.
Into that. They can't click into that for like a whole game, because then they can't play Sabonis. Sabonis can't be part of small ball.
Right.
And that's where that, like the Clippers, for the Wolves Clippers or whatever. And again, Wolves have kind of smoked the Clippers, but the Clippers can and very well might game 1, come out with like Kawhi's the 5. Right. And you go, that could work, with the Kings, it's just like,
we're talking about like 12 minutes.
Yeah. And to that end, I don't think that's gonna it could send the Wolves into one of their negative spirals, right? It could maybe win you a game, but I think if the Wolves get knocked out of the playoffs by small ball, it will be by a team who can do it the whole time, or 36 minutes versus 12 of them. And to that end, and to the Brown point of sort of matching up to the opponent, I think it will be them leaning into going bigger, which now involves Alex Len, who, probably a lot of Wolves fans are like completely rolling their eyes at. Like he's turned into a competent backup 5, but you're not loving that in the playoffs. If your answer is to match up with this team is bringing in minimum contract or whatever Alex Len to be one of the answers. I'm curious. That's what I'm curious tomorrow night is like how they try to match the Wolves, because I think that's what they'll do. They're obviously going to start Sabonis, right? So what are their options other than going small, because that's sort of going to be the path forward. And at that point, it's just like, hope the offense is great, right? Like
that. Yeah, that's really, I think that's what it comes down to. And that's the flaw of this team, and the Kings or you can point to Denver a lot about how they built out their roster, right? Of, early in the process, they're starting Will Barton and Paul Millsap. And it's like, okay, I kind of see that with Harrison Barnes and Kevin Huerter right now. Or you go back to Minnesota a few years ago, and it's funny that now we get to talk about the Gobert trade as if maybe this wasn't horrible, considering, I feel like every year I see you in Summer League, we're talking about like how wild the last season was for each one of our teams, and it's just polar opposites. They make no sense. You can never predict what's going to happen here. But they do lack a versatility like that. And even you go to the bench, like Chris Duarte has been playing well recently. I think that he does provide some things defensively.
Yeah.
But there's an offensive trade-off, obviously. He can be a little trigger happy with some of his shots, not a great decision maker. And that's sort of part of the flaw here is when you have this free-flowing offense, you need quick decision makers. And even having one that's not will just totally throw off the offensive flow. You see it with Davion Mitchell sometimes, Chris Duarte, like I mentioned. And it's tough to find guys that do that and also excel on the defensive end and have good size. Like Mike Brown is constantly hinting at or complimenting other teams' size or saying, our 3-point defense, like we have to do this considering our size.
Are you listening to this press conference?
Right. Exactly.
The signals. Yeah. That's what, it's going to come. And if we don't even want to say the Wolves, because maybe rule the Wolves out because they're not quote unquote proven or whatever, but it's like Denver, ultimately the Kings are going to need to find a different and better version of themselves before they're ready to compete with the elite teams in the Western Conference. There's too many holes right now to probably make that type of deep run. And I don't think like they're better than a normal 8th seed. Like that kind of sucks for the Wolves, honestly. Like a normal year would be like you get like Houston in the 8,
Right.
That's a total, like the Wolves probably sweep that series. I think the Wolves lose a couple times, probably the Kings, if that's the 1-8, or 2-7 or whatever it is. And that is because it's not because the Kings are a perfect team, but I do believe there is some Sabonis kind of in pick and roll on the roll going at Gobert that could give the Wolves some problems there. And who else can the Wolves put on Sabonis other than Gobert? I mean, maybe you try Cat and you have Rudy lurk off of Mitchell, or if they present that there. But if the shooters, I can't really do that. It's kind of got to be Gobert and Sabonis. I do have a little bit of those concerns about Fox's speed, just because it's something I've seen, them hurt them with. Cat needing to chase. Like these are a lot of, when we've been talking over the course of the season, doing, big picture fears for the Wolves. That's kind of it. And the harassing passing lanes, turnovers. Like the Kings can do a lot of the things that the Wolves are bad at. They can poke at those things, but ultimately they're going to they just don't match up talent-wise, or at least a depth of talent there, which leads me all to kind of believe if ultimately the Wolves struggled in this series or lost it, it would be more so them shooting themselves in the foot than it would be like, all right, the Kings just beat them, like it would be more, I think it'll be more competitive than a normal 1-8 series might be.
I think so too. And I think that it would be big to obviously like capitalize on those mistakes. And you got to sort of push Minnesota into making those mistakes. And when the Kings play good defense, like when they are engaged and locked in, they can put out an okay product on that end of the floor. They play very physical. I think the rotations, the guys are getting more accustomed to it. The closeouts could use a little bit of cleaning up, and that's going to be tough, especially against a guy like Cat and Jaden McDaniels, this ridiculous length that we just keep talking about, obviously. But, when they do lock in, they look like a very solid, around middle of the pack defensive team. And
I'm impressed. I'm impressed by the effort, man. I will say that. Like it's popping in, and I've watched a lot this week, but just even over the course of the season, I'm like, and maybe like sometimes it's one of those where you're a little too close to it. Like from afar, I'm like, all right, like I have a respect for the Kings defense that I absolutely did not have a year ago.
It's very sporadic, and like you see it with Keegan pretty consistently. Keegan's been so good, by the way. Like again, I would be shocked if he's not the guy placed on Anthony Edwards, but like he's getting placed on Steph Curry, on Devin Booker, on Paul George. And it's not like he's locking these guys down, but he's making them work. And in year 2 or coming out of year 1, I never would have thought that would have been the case. And again, that's just so many reps playing one-on-one with maybe the fastest guy in the league.
Yeah.
That really pays off there. So they have their moments. De'Aaron can be an elite defender and as disruptive as it gets when he's locked in. But if he has a heavy offensive responsibility in this series, which would probably be the case, obviously, how much can you also output on the defensive end? So I think when the Kings are at their best, they would absolutely make it a series. And with effort being, waning a bit throughout the course of the season, I would like to think that wouldn't be a concern in the postseason.
Yeah.
But you never really know.
Keegan's going to get a max, man.
I think so. And that's their timeline here in my mind. Like, you better get another guy before Keegan goes on to that next contract.
I mean, because it's, Wolves fans aren't going to like to hear this, turn this off. But like, Keegan Murray's better than Jaden McDaniels. Like, that's not even, like, I mean, just the two-way ability of it. Like,
he had 47 and made 11 straight threes earlier this year.
Yeah. And he did in was it the Heat? No, it wasn't the Heat. It was a Clippers game. Wasn't he like 6 of 7? And then he took like a heave at the end. One of the games, He was like 7 for 7. He took a heave and missed like 1 3. That was like all it was. I mean, I'd say that to mean like Jaden is at this like 25 mil a year level. And given that Keegan's defense is not as good as Jaden, but he's a really good perimeter defender, defensive player, plus the offense. I mean, he's going to be up there 30. I mean, it's not this summer, right? That they're giving an extension to be next summer.
No, yeah, this is year 2. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and offensively too, I think that, like we said earlier, like we're talking about De'Aaron, Malik getting in the mid range. I think that Keegan would be really big in that too. You need a guy that's going to try to just make something happen here. He's their third guy long term, obviously. It's just right now, have that mindset going into these games. And I think that would get hounded going into the playoffs. And I think that he would end up getting up a lot of shots in the series.
No, absolutely. He's the one. And, tomorrow night, listeners, whatever, we'll watch this. So Keegan has leveled up. Like that is that. I probably should have talked about that a little bit more. That is a scary factor. Another thing to put in the, like, Kings kind of have this there too. Thought this was awesome, man. I'm excited for the game tomorrow night. It's a cool weekend for the Wolves. They got the Kings and Clippers, which it's weird, man. Covering a good team now, you're like, oh man, the Grizzlies game or something like that. And then on the other end, when you play in a good team, which I'm putting the Kings up there, but like a team that challenges you, it's these are the ones that, like, I think for Wolves fans, like, if you care about the the playoffs and where this team is going, like, these are the ones to watch, right? Like the Kings and the Clippers. I'm excited for this weekend. They kind of need to play a good team. They just get a little sleepy against the Spurs and Grizzlies, but I'm excited to watch. Y'all can follow Brendan Nunez on Twitter at Brendan Nunez NBA. Read his work over at Sacktown Sports. King's Pulse is back. What's going on? Plug it away.
It is. Yeah. King's Pulse podcast is back. Took a little break as I got settled into the new job this year, but back at it, man. Yeah. I'm excited. It's been a fun year. This is still part of the process. It was, as Minnesota fans know, it was a long time in Sacramento too, with no postseason. So they're still in a good spot long term. It's just, I think they're, maybe a step behind in the process for a team like Minnesota, for example, which again is funny because I remember saying the exact same thing, but opposite to you at last summer.
Yeah, I know. It's a tough conference, dude. It's tough. I was thinking about that with the Grizzlies last night too. I'm like, the Grizzlies are nothing right now, but if they
get a lottery pick, they get Ja back, they get Marcus back. Like,
I mean, now they're up back kind of in probably the Nuggets, Wolves, Thunder. Who am I missing? Clippers group up there. Like, West is no joke, and I don't think that's gonna change anytime soon. It makes this Kings team be like, Wolves fans are gonna look at the standings. Maybe I haven't seen the Kings in a month or so, and be like, oh, 8th seed. Like, this is not like, it's just a Western Conference where they might be the 8th seed, but they're probably the quality of team we more think of as like a 4 or 5 seed historically in the West. So I think it'll be a challenge. I'm excited to watch that game tomorrow, and maybe we'll get a playoff series. See you out in Sacramento.
Maybe we will see. De'Aaron Fox TBD for tomorrow for what it's worth. Left
Yeah,
knee
what? So I didn't
contusion.
watch the Denver game. Why didn't he play? He played in the
He
Miami.
banged knees early in that Miami game. Actually, I think it was around like the 3-minute mark of the first or second quarter, and then was hobbling a little bit. Finished the game, but then went through, shoot around, warm up, and everything last night in Denver. So TBD for.
Did Monk start then?
They started Davion.
Yeah, they just want to keep Monk in there.
They are, yes. Coach Brown has said before, it's harder to replace what Malik does off the bench than, maybe find somebody to fill into that starting spot.
He's short Naz Reid, man. Or Naz Reid is tall Malik Monk. I honestly think those two players are like weirdly similar. And you wouldn't think of it. Monk's going to win Sixth Man of the Year, but Naz is going to be on that ballot too. Similar sort of roles. Whatever. I could talk to you about the Kings all day. But he's Brendan Nunes. You're following him on Twitter at Brendan Nunes. I'm Dane at DaneMooreNBA. Until tomorrow with Kyle. Yeah, he's Brendan. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever